Hello and greetings from NEASC. My name is Trillium Hiblin, and I'm happy to welcome you to this webinar, one of the webinars in our series. And this one is titled Developing a Shared Understanding of High Quality Learning. And today our speaker is Dr. Diane Ullman. She is, among many other things, an international accreditation leader for NEASC, leading accreditation visits all over the world. I think she's led at least 100 visits, if not many more at this point. She also coaches schools to develop toward 21st century learning environments. And she has a long list of distinguished career accomplishments before NEASC. She was a former superintendent in Connecticut. She has been a leadership and strategic planning consultant, and she is also the co-author of Learning Personalized, an evolution of the contemporary classroom. So it's our pleasure today to introduce Diane Ullman to speak on this topic. Diane, I'm going to pass it off to you and go off screen now.
Hello, everybody, whether it's morning, afternoon, evening for you. I'm just delighted to be with you and to share this webinar. I want to start by apologizing for my voice. Like so many people around the world, I'm struggling with a cold, and so it's affecting my voice. I hope that I can convey to you all of the important information that I have this morning to share with you. I'm going to share my screen right now, and we'll begin our webinar. So the focus of this webinar is on developing a shared understanding of high quality learning. And it's an essential component of NEASC accreditation. And it is something that we find schools identify as one of the most transformative pieces for them as they go through the ACE learning process. What we're going to do this morning is we're going to share with you some the information on building a shared understanding of high quality learning. But we want to first know who's with us today. So in a moment, there's going to be a poll, and we just want you to indicate whether you are in a teaching position, a leadership position, or a governmental role, or perhaps something else. We'll take a moment for that poll to register. So looks like majority of our people in the webinar this morning are from a leadership position, a good number in teaching positions, and some who are in other positions. I'm going to begin by talking a little bit about, let's see if I can get my PowerPoint to move along. There we go. Here's our plan for our time together this morning. We're going to talk about the why of a shared understanding of high quality learning and why it's essential for school transformation. Next, we're going to talk about what it is and how to build your own shared understanding of high quality learning. And then lastly, about how to assess your current state and energize your community around a transformed vision for all learners. As it mentioned in the advertisement for this workshop, a shared understanding of high quality learning is a required element of NEASC accreditation. And so we really believe that it's most important to help our schools understand what it is, why we do it, and how we do it. So my first question to you is something for you to just pause and think about. If you and I, observed in a classroom and we saw high quality learning happening, what would we see? What would we see learners be doing? What would be the nature of the tasks that they're engaged in? What would be the role of the teacher as we looked into those classrooms? Just take a moment to think about that. We're going to move to begin with in why a shared understanding of high quality learning. And when I think about this why, I think about the fact that there are as many definitions of high quality learning probably as there are people in your school. And the more that we can establish a shared understanding of high quality learning, the more power that our schools will have to transform. So to begin with, a shared understanding of high quality learning really is your true north. So I like to think about this as in relation to the North Star, the Polaris, the North Star that stays roughly in the same place in the sky so that it remains, oops, I'm sorry, so that it remains in a reliable way in the north direction. And for schools, a shared understanding of high quality learning gives you just that, a reliable way of maintaining a forward direction. In the literature, it's referred to as the path of fulfillment and purpose. And it is your purpose that you want to, first of all, uncover and then share as a whole school community. A shared understanding of high quality learning definitely represents your true purpose as a school. It also embodies the promise that you make to parents and to their children. Parents send you their children based on the promises you make. Those promises are often contained in the literature that you share with parents, or perhaps what you tell them about when they come to visit your school. But your ability to describe high quality learning and what it looks like will often be a deciding factor in a parent's decision to choose your school. So it's vitally important that you know what that shared purpose is and that you can explain it to parents. I often think that if parents were looking at a school and they came in contact with a teacher, that they would get the same answer to what high quality learning is like in this school as they would get from the leader of the school, and perhaps even from the students that they talk to. So this promise that you make to parents, they send their children to you with this fervent hope that you will develop in them that which you promise in your guiding statements. And lastly, agreed upon impacts and the things and impacts are contained in the shared understanding of learning. They create powerful forward momentum for a school. Teachers across programs and grades can then learn together to foster those impacts. So once they know what they are, they can become part of a community that studies what those impacts look like in classrooms, and then they can be more able to deliver them in a consistent way. For students, it means that if they understand the kind of learning that you're looking for, it allows them to internalize those impacts and take them out into the world after they leave your school. In fact, what we are looking for is what that guiding force is that directs your school going forward. Also, a shared understanding of learning can help leadership focus resources and systems and structures to support those impacts. In NEASC, when we talk about a school's 4 C's, this is what we're talking about. Are schools able to focus their resources, their systems, and their structures on the things that matter most to them? So when we talk about what leadership can do to support a shared understanding of learning, we often think about the systems that support what happens with teachers and students when they're learning in a classroom. And these 7 systems are the things that leadership can think about once there is a shared understanding of learning in place. For instance, a professional learning system should be aligned to the shared understanding of learning. So that professional learning in schools for teachers is aimed at those things that you claim to want to promote in your school through your shared vision. Also, the continuous improvement system. Is the shared understanding of learning something that the school is pursuing through its strategic plan? If it is not, it's highly likely that it won't happen. This shared understanding of learning has to be central to all of the work that the school does, whether it's embedded in the instructional system, the professional learning system, the talent management system, and so forth. All of these systems are ways that your school can further support the shared understanding of learning to ensure that it actually happens on a daily basis between teachers and students. So what exactly is a shared understanding of high quality learning? From a NEASC point of view, from our perspective, a shared understanding of learning has 3 components. First of all, it describes the aspirations and your future-oriented goals for learners. Oftentimes, your aspirations are found in your guiding statements. It also describes the qualities that your learners must develop if they're going to be able to fulfill those aspirations. Oftentimes, aspirations sit in the form of a set of guiding statements, but they're not directly acted upon by a school. By identifying the qualities that students must possess if they're going to achieve your aspiration, that articulation will allow you to begin working on them. But finally, the third part of a shared understanding of high quality learning is that the school can actually align its daily practices to that shared understanding of learning. So for instance, the pedagogy that is used in the school, is it supporting the qualities that the school has identified that it wants to develop? And are those qualities aligned to the aspirations? So there is a direct through line from aspirations to qualities to daily practice. Any one of these elements without the other two are going to give you less power as a school in pursuing your highest goals. In ACE learning, both the school and the NEASC visitors are looking for consistency between the shared understanding of learning and the daily practices. So when we look in classrooms as visitors, we are looking to see if the school is actually developing those qualities through its daily practices. And we hope that the school is looking at their own work through that same lens. At this point, I want you to begin thinking about, when you start looking in classrooms at learning, what is it that you are actually seeing? And do you know that what you're seeing is actually furthering the things that matter most to you? And if you know NEASC well, you know that the proof of what we're doing rests in what's happening in the classroom with students. While we care about good documentation, what we care about is what's actually happening with learners when they're in the classroom with their teacher or wherever they're learning. And that learning represents what the school desires most. So we think that these are three interconnected parts. The highest aspirations, which have the longest view, you're really aiming towards the kinds of graduates that you want when they leave your school. It speaks to the qualities that you want to develop in students that support your highest aspirations. And then, is your daily practice aligned to the things that matter most to you and what you hope your students become when they leave your school? As the superintendent of schools, I can remember graduation and watching. I had approximately 400 to 500 learners who would be graduating in a given school year. And I made myself shake, well, we would shake every single hand of every graduate. And I made myself look into their eyes and ask myself, did we give you what we promised? Sometimes the answer was yes. And sometimes the answer was maybe not. And when that dawned on me, and when I could see the learners whose needs we weren't meeting, it caused me to go back and think about what we were doing on a daily basis, what qualities we were trying to develop, because our highest aspirations are for all learners, not just some. A shared understanding of high quality learning begins with articulating your highest aspirations, as we've just indicated. And it's important to think about the fact that your highest aspirations can't come from a select few. If they're going to be the glue that binds the whole community together, they should be developed by the learning community in a broad sense and for the learning community so that it can generate commitment on an authentic engagement. If your faculty and parents and students can understand what those highest aspirations are, it will begin to make sense why you are doing things on a daily basis. And for many schools, this highest purpose, these aspirations, are found in their guiding statements. So I want you to take a minute to think about your own guiding statements that you have for your school and whether or not they do articulate your highest purpose for learners. Sometimes the guiding statements do exactly that, and sometimes they're lacking in the specificity about what you want learners, who you want them to become as a result of their time with you. Some schools choose to refresh their shared understanding of high quality learning during the internal reflection, just to be sure that it responds to the 21st century learners in their midst. At NEASC, we are asking schools to think about aspirations that will prepare students to be productive citizens in the world that they are facing. And so knowing that your guiding statements are the place where you start because they contain your aspirations, I encourage you to take a second look at them and see if they really actually articulate the kinds of skills and dispositions that you want your students to have as they leave you at the end of their time, whether it be at the end of high school or whatever time they have to leave. Are you slowly developing them towards those aspirations? You want them to be sure to reflect what we know about 21st century learning. Either way, however you do this, your aspirations for learners must be the community's collective commitment to the kind of learning that will happen when students come to you, when parents send their children to you. This notion of a collective commitment is so important, because if it is just the view or the vision of a small group of people, you won't have the kind of commitment to that statement that you are hoping for. So a shared understanding of learning also articulates the qualities or the impacts. In ACE language, we would call them impacts, that are the building blocks that help learners reach your aspirations. In short, we say that the impacts or qualities are the change that we want to see in learners. More specific than your aspirations, they describe the knowledge and the dispositions and the skills that we want learners to possess. So the question is, what would a student know and be able to do if they were to reach your community's aspirations? What kind of people would you have graduating from your schools? These qualities or impacts are articulated as a part of your shared understanding of learning. They are the building blocks that help learners reach your aspirations. Finally, the how. So, so far what we have is qualities that are written down and aspirations that are hopefully inspiring for your community. But unless you are working on your qualities as a daily practice in the classroom or wherever students are learning, you are not going to realize the impact that you want on your learners. So when we think of daily practices, we think of the pedagogy that you use. We think of the programs that you have chosen, and we think of the structures that will characterize learning for all. So as an example, inquiry might be a pedagogy that you choose, or problem-based learning might be a pedagogy that you choose. Maybe a Socratic seminar or authentic assessments or design thinking. All of these things could be driving you towards the qualities that you believe in, and help your learners gradually become proficient in these pedagogies. And so if you are an inquiry-oriented school, is there a shared understanding of what good inquiry looks like? And are teachers practicing it in relatively a similar way? And are you enabling your teachers to learn from each other as they begin to get better and better at inquiry? And this is really what the shared part of the shared understanding means, is that the pedagogy that you choose and the programs and the structures that you create should be shared and understood and practiced in generally the same way across the school. An example of some programs might be responsive classroom or restorative justice or service learning, as programs that you develop and you institute in service of the qualities that you want to develop in students. In many ways, NEASC talks about the importance of student autonomy. And the question always arises is, where and how do we give students autonomy and a voice in their learning? Well, oftentimes teachers will allow students to co-construct curriculum and give them a voice in what they're going to learn, how they're going to learn. and how they're going to demonstrate their learning. That one point on this slide could be a webinar unto itself. But the notion is that what's really important for NEASC, one of the sort of the core concepts of ACE is giving student agency over their learning. And so the qualities that you're trying to develop are related to that. You know, are you developing agency so that students can become the kinds of learners that you hope that they are? So I'm going to give you here an example, which I think in many ways constitutes a really good example of what we mean by a shared understanding of high quality learning. So this is from some STEM schools in Egypt. And if you just look at the aspirations, this is something that is far out on the horizon. This is something that in Egypt, they are dedicated to doing, so dedicated that they have developed a series of STEM schools across the country that take the most talented high school students, bring them in and help them develop the skills, the qualities and the skills to become the generation of leaders that will solve Egypt's grand challenges. So the problems in Egypt, the grand challenges are basically fundamental to what the grand challenges are around the world, but there are some specifics that make them important to Egypt. It might be water quality. It might be housing. It might be dealing with the climate problems that are arising that manifest themselves specifically in Egypt. So these grand challenges are something that Egypt knows if they're going to survive as a nation that they must tackle. So they've asked themselves, well, if we want graduates to be able to solve Egypt's grand challenges, what qualities do we have to develop in our students? We know they have to be researchers because the answers to the problems that exist are not readily apparent. We know that they need to be problem solvers. They have to have a very deep understanding of how you approach problems to come up with potential solutions and test those solutions out. They need to have the mind of an inventor because the solutions that they're going to design are not yet out there. So they are going to have to invent new solutions to some very challenging problems. And lastly, they have to be self-navigators. They have to be able to have an idea, to pursue that idea independently, and they have to be able to go through the process of researching and problem solving and inventing as individuals. So what happens in STEM schools in Egypt on a daily basis? So their daily practices are very well defined. Every single student learns the engineering design process at a pretty high level from day one. They also work together on projects. Some of them are independent projects where they have to do the work on their own, but mostly they're independent collaborative projects, meaning independent from a teacher directing them. They have mentors who guide them on the side, but these students are working, they propose a problem, they use the engineering design process to begin to uncover the problem and then come up with a solution. They also have to be good at goal setting and monitoring their own progress. The school is after independence in these practices when students leave them. And this is a high school program. And it started off with, I'm just fascinated by this example. It started off as one school. And I think there are now maybe 22 of these schools, maybe more, across Egypt. And so I think this is a very good example of how a school, in this case, it's a country, has aspirations for learners that are very clear, that they have identified the qualities that will help students reach that aspiration. And on a daily basis, they are working at the practice of helping students develop those qualities so that they can solve Egypt's grand challenges. I think if you wanted to Google this, you could. It's STEM schools in Egypt. They're doing some pretty phenomenal work. And I think this represents such a concrete, very specific example of what it means to have a shared understanding of high quality learning. I will also say that the professional development for teachers who work in those schools is intense. And there's summer work before the school year starts for teachers, but there's also summer work for students, because some of those students, while they may be very bright, may not have had the background skills to enter into this sort of rigorous program very easily. Here's another example, qualities and associated daily practices. So let me just say, first of all, that the qualities reside in the ACE learning principles. And so we are asking schools to use the ACE learning principles as a way to shape their shared understanding of high quality learning. For some schools that are both IB and NEASC accredited, whether it be the collaborative learning protocol or otherwise, you also have the IB learner profile and the approaches to teaching and learning that you could look to for qualities. And I think both organizations, NEASC and the IB, really focus on the development of qualities. And so this is an example from a school that I've recently worked with. And it's just one quality, and they're in the beginning of unpacking this process. So at this school, they want to be an inclusive community which empowers and inspires learners to make meaningful impacts in tomorrow's world. Just one quality that they know they have to develop if they want to have their students to have meaningful impact in tomorrow's world is the development of an ethical mindset. They think that is critical to being the kind of learner they want to turn into the world to make a difference. So what is at least one daily practice that will support this? They want students to engage with real world problems and issues, because if they don't do it while they're in school and they're learning, it's not going to happen that when they get out in the world that they will have a disposition to be looking around and seeing what difference can I make in the world. So an aspiration leads to qualities, leads to daily practice. And this is the challenge that we set before you, which is, does your set of guiding statements identify for you aspirations? Have you translated those aspirations into qualities? And furthermore, have you translated them into daily practice so that teachers and students are engaged with them on a daily basis? And over time, they develop the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that you are hoping for. Really, a caution here is that if everything is important, then nothing is. So as you're going through this process of developing your shared understanding of high quality learning, it's a matter of continuously honing your work so that you are left with a set of qualities that are critical. It can't be 20 qualities or sometimes even 10, but you want a small set of qualities that you think represent your aspirations, because a small set is what you can work on as a school. And then you want your daily practices to be curated. It has to be a thoughtful set of the most important qualities and practices that will give focus to your work. So again, if everything is important, nothing is. There are lots of things you could be doing, probably many things that you think you should be doing. But what is the must? What must you be doing if you are to stay true to your aspirations and the qualities that you have developed? When you look at the 10 ACE learning principles, each of which have impacts, there are many, many things that you could choose to develop in your students, but you can't do them all. So you have to decide which things are most important to you. Importantly, what do we mean by shared? So the degree to which a school has a shared understanding of high quality learning can only be determined by watching learning happening. It really doesn't matter, especially to us as NEASC visitors, but it shouldn't matter to you as a school if what's written in your documents, if it's not being translated to daily practice. And this is the reason why, as NEASC visitors, we spend so much time in classrooms, because we're really concerned with whether or not what is written on paper as the school's core purposes and what it aims to do for students is actually happening in the classroom. So as visitors, we try to spend as much time as possible when we're in the preparatory stage and in the internal reflection stage. We try to spend as much time as possible trying to connect what people have written on paper as their aspirations and the qualities and the practice, and we look to see if we see it represented in the classroom. If we don't see it represented, that's feedback for the school, and it can be something that the school might want to work on. And I will reemphasize here that NEASC is not a pass-fail system. We are really looking to help schools develop. And so if we see that a school has some very compelling documents, but we don't see it translated in the classroom or not, we will give you that feedback, and then that becomes something that you can pay attention to as a school. So the words and documents alone don't convey the subtleties of learning and teaching. What really matters to us is how that plays out in a classroom, what we can see when learners and teachers are together or when learners are working with each other. Just as an example, there may be as many interpretations of self-directed learning as there are people in this webinar. But if a school has a shared understanding of self-directed learning that is anchored in classroom practice, I can guarantee you that self-directed learning will grow, especially if teachers have an opportunity to learn what you mean and to watch each other teach and to be collaborative and share what it looks like when self-directed learning is happening in classrooms. So how do schools develop a shared understanding of high quality learning? Well, there's no substitute for collaboration around classroom practice. It is essential if a school is going to develop. Shared means that teachers and leaders have the same understanding of what a practice means when it is being done well. So we have to give teachers an opportunity to make sense of the aspirations, the qualities, and the practices. How does this happen? Well, study groups for one, maybe book clubs, where teachers are reading a particular text and developing their understanding. Maybe action research, where you have one quality that you want to develop and teachers develop action research projects around how that could look in their classroom. Peer observation, giving teachers a chance to see each other. Some teachers are really good at a specific quality and are willing to share their practice with others. And that same teacher might be the person who, in another situation with a different quality, may be the one who goes to observe to learn. Lesson study is something that teachers do to get really good at implementing a particular practice. We see lots of schools recording lessons for group analysis. All of these are viable ways for teachers to learn what a particular practice means, whether it be self-directed learning or any other practice that the school is trying to develop. I would say that coaching is a powerful tool for developing new thinking and new practices. And I would dare to say that without some coaching, either peer coaching or coaching from a leader, somebody in a leadership position, or a coach that is hired from an external source, coaching is the thing that makes the difference in whether or not teachers can actually implement a new practice. The research is more than clear that without coaching, if you're asking teachers to make a change in their practice that is transformational, they won't be able to do it without coaching. That's a whole other idea that we could develop more, but I can tell you the research that has been around for decades again and again reinforces the notion that developing transformational teaching practices requires coaching. Somebody who knows how to do it could be the one to help teach others. And practice can't be truly shared if it's not observed in situ, meaning if practice isn't observed when it's happening in a classroom, then we don't really know. So that is again the importance of watching learning happening in a classroom. We can't sit around a table and know if we actually have developed a shared understanding by using words and talking to each other. We have to go look at it in classrooms. And what that means to me is that leadership in a school has to provide opportunities for teachers to watch each other practice a new skill, a new strategy, a new pedagogy. So when do NEASC schools develop their shared understanding of high quality learning? Well, that often happens sometimes it happens before the preparatory visit or the internal reflection visit. Some schools do this. And in fact, at NEASC, we used to call this a definition of learning. And as an organization, we have learned that the term definition of learning led schools to create a pretty static definition that resided in a document. What we really wanted was this notion of a dynamic shared understanding of learning that was constantly being refreshed and renewed and discussed by teachers. And so we asked schools that already have a definition of learning or a pre-developed shared understanding of learning before they enter the internal reflection, that they take the time to look at it again. So what we suggest is that schools unpack the learning principles, because within those learning principles reside the impacts or the qualities that would represent 21st century learning, and that they use those impacts in the learning principles, a rich source of ideas. They use those to reflect on their internal reflection document if they have one. Their shared understanding document if they have one. If they don't have one, use those impacts to develop your shared understanding of high quality learning. When situated inside the internal reflection, the shared understanding of high quality learning then becomes the focus of the school's major learning plans. So what we see is that schools who refresh their shared understanding of learning or create it in the internal reflection then create learning plans that allow them to pursue those that shared understanding over the next 5 years as the learning work of their school. So the importance of this is I cannot be understated. We talked about the why in terms of being sort of inspirational to your community, being the thing that you can organize around, but it really should become part of that system of strategic planning or a continuous improvement. If that shared understanding of learning, the qualities and the practices don't move into your school's major learning plans and the strategic plan, it will be very hard to find the time and the resources to begin to work on them. So this is what happens during the internal reflection when a shared understanding of high quality learning is happening. First, we ask schools to unpack the learning principles and impacts and to engage with the guiding questions. After those learning principles and impacts are well understood, we ask the school to create a shared understanding of high quality learning grounded in the ACE learning principles and impacts. So the shared understanding rises out of the learning principles and impacts. And I would stop here to say that some schools have their own impacts that they are trying to reach, and it's perfectly fine to use those as well. And then we ask schools to find the current state of their school relative to the qualities and the practices that they say they want to pursue. So looking for evidence of the current state happens at the beginning of, or happens once the shared understanding of high quality learning is developed. And that current state is documented by the developmental continuum so that you rate yourselves as a school in terms of where you are relative to your shared understanding of learning, because you get the chance to describe the future state of what you would like to see for your school also in this internal reflection. And then your major learning plans are what close the gap between your current state and your future state. So I think given this set of steps, you can see why we ask schools not to develop their shared understanding of learning before they unpack the learning principles and before they go through that whole process that the internal reflection requires. So putting it all together, I just want to point out that developing a shared understanding of high quality learning begins with a school looking at the ACE principles and impacts, and also looking at their own understanding of the impacts that they would like to develop in learners, and also looking at what those impacts mean. And then from that, they develop a shared understanding of learning that is appropriate for their school using the ACE learning principles, and then they develop major learning plans. So I hope you're seeing through this diagram that developing a shared understanding of high quality learning is very central to the whole process of the internal reflection process and NEASC accreditation. It is at the heart of what we do. So a shared understanding is important. It can ignite school transformation when it does these things. When it reflects the learning principles and other relevant research, when it's co-created and well understood by stakeholders in the community, when it's observable in everyday teaching and learning, when it promotes collaboration among faculty and school leadership, and when it empowers teachers to try new ways of teaching. It becomes the central focus of teacher and leader hiring, development, and appraisal. That's a big sentence right there, but the shared understanding of learning becomes a central focus of who you hire, because you want people who believe in the qualities that you're trying to develop. It becomes a central piece of how you develop your teachers over time. And it becomes a central part of your teacher appraisal process. It means that you give teachers regular feedback about where they are in implementing the practices that you have decided are most important for your school. And I think you can begin to see how this notion of a shared understanding of high quality learning has a really large impact on not only classroom practice, but everything that goes into supporting classroom practice, all of those systems that I talked about in the beginning. And what we're looking for is development. And as I teach people to become leaders in the ACE learning process, what I emphasize again and again is that NEASC is a developmental process. Nobody has to be there, because the only there is the growth, and we're looking for growth over time. And wherever you are on that continuum, our goal for you is to make progress on that continuum. But the goal is not that you should be at any single place at a given time. So I'm hoping that you're seeing how this shared understanding of high quality learning is central to NEASC accreditation, and that it should be at the heart of the work that a school is doing to grow. If you have questions and you'd like to help you would like help building your own shared understanding of high quality learning, you can send an email with your request to CIE@neasc.org. That's our main website address, and that address gets the emails and that address get reviewed regularly. So if you're looking for help, we can certainly respond to you. But I want to say that before I conclude, first of all, thank you for bearing with my voice this morning. But most importantly, we wish you grand conversations and a renewed sense of excitement about your school's purpose and direction. We think that the shared understanding of high quality learning can do that for you. So thank you very much.
Diane, thank you so much for sharing today, and especially doing so while you were not feeling great. If we can just take a moment, we've realized that within the chat, we have a wide variety of people who are joining us here today, including people whose schools are using a different NEASC protocol and who may not be familiar with the ACE protocol, which is one of the protocols that we use mostly with international schools, which is some of the references that you made may be unfamiliar to some people, of course. So I did go ahead and put a few of the links to parts of our website in the chat about the international protocols, including the ACE protocol, in case anyone's interested. But maybe we could just make some connections, Diane, to some of the other aspects, how this connects, for example, to the vision of the graduate, which is an area of focus for a lot of the domestic schools that NEASC works with. How do you see that fitting together with the vision of the graduate?
So oftentimes the vision of the graduate or portrait of the graduate describes the aspirations, those high-level aspirations that you're trying to achieve with your schools overall. On occasion, it also describes the qualities that you want to develop. Not always, but I'd say most of the ones that I've seen describe the kinds of qualities that you want to develop. Less frequently, we see the actual daily practices that the school wants to support. I mean, I'm saying that all of that can exist in a portrait of the graduate, but different schools take it to different levels. The difference we ask is that we say until it's in daily practice, we can't say that we're doing it. And so I think there's quite a bit of similarity and consistency between the two.
Yeah. So would you say then that schools that have maybe parts of this existing in different places, where maybe they've defined the aspirations, but not gotten down to the level of the qualities, for example, that every school that has pieces of this could make it more full through further discovery as a community?
Absolutely. And I think that, frankly, we know that this is a challenging framework. And so we don't expect that every school has this just right, even just right for them. And so part of what we try to do as visitors is give you feedback on things that might make your shared understanding of high quality learning more impactful in terms of classroom practice. And so ACE is developmental, so we take schools wherever they are. And if your shared understanding of high quality learning is at a very beginning stage and you have parts of this, and you're interested in taking it further, we're there to help you. So what we've proposed is a large framework that makes schools powerful places for learning and for students. So our goal is to help schools more and more approach that sort of big idea of a shared understanding of learning.
Great. Another question for you, and if anyone who's still on would like to add any questions into the chat, I'd be happy to try to put those up as well to Diane. But one question I had for you, Diane, is about how leaders in a school can move an entire community toward a shared understanding, other than developing those factors together. What are some of the ways, you mentioned coaching, what are some of the other ways that leaders can help bring everyone along?
So just like with everything I've been talking about, it is, I think by focusing on what happens when kids are learning. And, if it's parents that we're talking to, so what is it that your children are bringing home and what are they saying about the learning that they're having, and trying to, I think your question is about all the way from aspirations to the daily practice. So I think, first of all, those aspirations really should be developed with the community present. So you can't get every parent, but you can get a representative group of parents. You can't get every student, but you can get representatives of the student body. You can get teachers involved. And I think it goes through revisions based on feedback. So, schools that really have a very solid understanding of high quality learning have gone through this. They've given people an opportunity to have a say, and they've slowly molded that so that it reflects the community values. And I think for teachers, it doesn't really make sense until they see what it looks like. Perhaps, coaching is one way to do it, but watching videos, there's a ton of videos out there to see what any particular practice looks like, what good inquiry looks like, what good Socratic seminars look like. Teachers really get it when they can see it happening. And so, and I say coaching is one way to do that, but there's a lot of other ways to give teachers access to, so what is this thing you're telling me you want me to do? And how is it I'm going to get good at it?
Yeah, great. So there's a question in the chat that's kind of taking off from this. The question is, how can a school maintain a shared understanding of high quality learning if they have high turnover of staff?
That's a great question. And I think it takes a very deliberate effort. And I think it starts at the point where you hire somebody. I think when you have that hiring conversation, you say to that person, here's what we stand for, and here's what we want for every student in this school. And tell me, is this a good match for you? And if it is a good match, tell me why and what it looks like when you've done it in a classroom. So it starts at that hiring process, but it also becomes something that you reinforce whenever you're having teachers together. I think if your major learning plans are focused on that and teachers have a say in those learning plans, if you're new to the school, you look at the learning plans to find where you fit, and leadership can show you where your impact can be. I think it takes just a refresh every year with all the way from hiring to development to just the messages that you give. I see a lot of heads of school using their aspirations and those qualities in messages to the faculty, maybe monthly newsletters, emphasizing pieces of it, but you have to keep it in the air. You have to keep it alive and vibrant so that everybody understands what it is you're about as a school.
Great. I'm just reviewing some of the other questions. Someone had a simple question. Just could you restate the difference between the definition of learning and the shared understanding of high quality learning?
Okay, good question. The definition of learning, what we intended in the beginning was that it would be like the shared understanding, but what we got was words on a page, and we didn't get the richness of the description of qualities and practices. And so we started using different language, and that different language conveys what we really were hoping that practice, or that thing that we asked of our schools, that it would translate into classroom practice. So the difference is the definition of learning almost always was a definition, like on paper, and that we weren't helping schools put that definition into practice. And so now we call it a shared understanding, meaning everybody knows what we mean, and that high quality learning is defined as they unpack the learning principles. At NEASC, we believe that high quality learning resides in those learning principles and impacts. And so that's why we think it's so important that it happen at the internal reflection process and not before.
Yeah, and I see there was another question in the Q&A too about the internal reflection process, and that the word internal, the phrase internal reflection process is what we call in the international school sphere, what we call our self-study process. So for schools that are going through one of the other protocols at NEASC, it may not be called internal reflection, but it's a period of time, usually around a school year, where schools get together in committees and do some deep reflection against the standards and principles that NEASC has put forward, so that it can evaluate where it is now, where it wants to go, and how it might bridge the gap between those two places. So that leads me to a follow-up question, Diane. With the shared understanding of high quality learning, should it describe where the school's current state, or should it describe the school's aspirations in terms of what kind of learning it would like to see consistently across the school?
So it should describe the school's aspirations. It starts with aspiration and it leads to the qualities that develop those aspirations, and finally the practice. What you're doing in your self-study, your internal reflection, is deciding, well, where are you currently relative to that shared understanding? And then where do you want to be in the future? And then creating plans to close the gap. So this whole statement is about your future aspirations.
Yeah, so the school may not currently reflect what you think is best practices and the most high quality learning yet, right? Across the board.
Yeah.
There may be pockets of excellence that represent what you want to see, but having the whole community come together and really define its vision for the future. This is where we're going. It may not be what we have yet today, but that's what we're working toward. That's what gets people excited, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's tempting to just define what you think is good right now, and say that's our.
That sometimes, and we just say to schools, don't shortchange yourself, because you're capable of really describing that desirable future and then really working towards it. And I think when the school community has that clarity of purpose and that clarity about how to achieve that purpose, it creates incredible energy within the school. And I think, the image that's in my mind is, the boat where everybody's rowing in the same direction. It's the oars are in sync, and people are moving forward. And what you see is that forward momentum increases over time as people get it. And they understand that if I learn to do these things, I'm part of a larger whole. It creates a real strong sense of community in the school.
Yeah, I think especially how it's described and how it's discussed, right? So it's not trying to fix something that's not good in the school or fix something that's wrong, but building off current strengths to get to the next iteration of the school that's going to be even more amazing for students. We always joke about which iPhone we have, and none of us wants to be carrying around, one that's 5 versions ago. So, Apple keeps reinventing and making things better. And so do schools do every year, every month, every 3 years, every 5 years. So there's always more. There's always more to aspire to.
And when those plans get translated into your strategic plan, they become there's accountability there for continuing with the work.
Exactly. Well, Diane, thank you so much for sharing today.
Very welcome.
And then Diane is also speaking at various conferences around the world. So hopefully you'll get a chance to do a deeper dive. This is a 1-hour session, but she does full day sessions on this as well.
I just have to say that it's so frustrating to just be able to speak and not see you, first of all, and also not be able to respond to your questions. So I do hope that at some point in the future, we get to do this work together. So thank you. Thank you, Trillium.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.